Hi, I'm standing in front of Christian Ministries in Shoreline, Washington, which is a Christian organization and a Christian school, private school, that's not far from a high school where I taught for 13 years. They're doing some very noisy maintenance over there. The reason I'm standing here and showing you this is because this used to be, in 1911, Firdale Sanatorium, which is where, if you had tuberculosis around that time, you would probably have been sent if you were in Seattle. I'm showing you this because I believe tuberculosis is the reason Frank Matsura left Japan. Joanne Rowe speculates that he left Japan to protect his pupils from catching his disease. That sounds plausible, even though at the turn of the century, how the disease was spread was not entirely well known. Now, I was a teacher, so I find the idea that his students were part of his decision to be entirely believable. However, I don't think it's that simple. He clearly wanted to be a professional photographer, which is what he became. I suspect that his uncle and aunt, his adoptive parents, would have opposed him becoming a professional photographer. He already had a safe and predictable job as a school teacher in his uncle's school. And at the turn of the century, photography was a relatively new technology, and any studio he would have set up would have been a commercial enterprise, and possibly, it could fail. He could go out of business. Sakai already had a safe and reliable job in Tokyo at his uncle's school, and I feel fairly certain that his adoptive parents would have told him to stay put. So I think his diagnosis was a blessing in disguise. It gave him an excuse to abandon the safe but boring job that his family had laid out for him. To go to America all by himself was a daring act, very brave. It was very risky. The idea that he left against his uncle and aunt's wishes is supported by the way he left. In the Japanese documentary I watched, his niece told the story that Sakai, Frank, just left one day and didn't tell anyone he was going. Just one morning he was gone. And when they figured out what he had done, they sent a family member down to Yokohama to intercept him. But by the time they got there, his ship had already sailed. As I said, how tuberculosis was spread was not well understood at the turn of the century. Now we know that tuberculosis is caused by bacteria, but at the time, many people, including many doctors, believed it was caused by something called miasma, or bad air. If you've ever read the short story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Fall of the House of Usher, then you would have read these lines describing a mist hanging around the house. An atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the gray wall and the silent tarn. A pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. In this story, a tarn is a body of unwholesome, dark, stinking, stagnant water from which this unwholesome vapor rises up. And that vapor is a miasma. And people believe that it caused illness, including tuberculosis. Other people thought that TB was an inheritable disease, that it ran in your family. So if some relative of yours had it, people would think that you might get it, and so you would be ineligible for marriage. So when he was diagnosed, when it was certain that he had it, he was instantly ineligible to be married, and any hopes he would have of a family and a marriage had to be abandoned. Therefore, I think he left Japan for 3 reasons. 1, he might have wanted to protect his pupils from possible contagion. 2, he wanted to become a professional photographer, which is what he became, and this gave him a reason to do that. And 3, because TB was a fatal, incurable disease at the time, he had nothing to lose. He couldn't get married. He couldn't work at his uncle's school as a teacher. He had a very finite amount of time left, and this gave him a reason to abandon all that and go off and do what he really wanted to do, which was to become a photographer. If you want to know more about what people thought about tuberculosis at the time, go to this webpage. There'll be a clickable link in the description, and type in an email address, and I will send you a dossier of historical information about Frank Matsura, and the current one that I'm going to send out is about tuberculosis. Plus, if you buy the novel pre-sale, you'll be automatically entered into a drawing to receive a free signed copy of the deluxe annotated edition before it is actually released to the public. You can give the one you bought to a friend. And not only that, subscribers will receive a free serialized short story, a prequel short story at the end of September, beginning at the end of September and going into the beginning of October. So please go to that website right now, type in your email address, and sign up for my dossier. Okay, thank you.